Okay, I have organized this presentation as a Word document. So I will scroll through it. It's 29 pages. So it will take about an hour. It's in three parts, part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 1 is the proposition, part 2 is the derivation, and part 3 is the consequence. Okay, so aesthetics in the making of a new civilizational order. We are not just facing global warming, we are facing global warning. And we have to develop a totally new kind of architecture, because all the architecture that we have today are derivations of the international style with all its different variations, right? Okay, so I'm actually an architect. I actually design, but I'm really a theoretician, okay? And my theorizing is a result of my practice. So everything that I think about is derived from what I actually do. Okay? So the hand informs the head, and the head informs the heart. So I am a total connection between head, heart, and hand. So this is a building which I conceptualized when I was age 24. But it was only realized 10 years later in 1974. In 1974, I was forced to leave Singapore because the secret police were on my tail. They closed down my firm. Anyway, that's another story. So I just illustrate three very different kind of projects. This one here is a fish conservation project on the upper reaches of the Kelantan River, which is in the northern part of Malaysia. And it was built entirely, I designed it and together with the Aboriginal people, the jungle people, who also built it with bamboo. This other project is Taoist temple in which I designed it together with the god. And the god was speaking through a medium in a trance. So the god asked me, what will the building, will it have walls? I said, no walls. He said, then how are you going to keep the rain out? I said, well, we have a very big roof. And how many stories is it? I said, 3 stories. So he said, very good. But I was shocked because my original design was a rectangle, a square pyramid, right, with 4 corners. And the god said through the medium. The medium was a woman, and she said that no, we cannot have the sharp corner because it's very rude to point to people. So I was very worried. See, is a god asking me to turn the corners up like a Chinese roof? So no, so I chopped the corners off. So it became a rectangle, an octagon, and then it's built. And a friend of mine from China, she's an architectural historian. I brought her there, and as we approached by taxi, she looked at the building from a distance and said, "It's a Taoist building." I said, how can you know from such a distance? She said that if it is Confucianist, it will be very heavy. If it is Buddhist, it will be lighter. If it is Taoist, it will be very light. And very interestingly, when we were trying to tell the taxi driver how to get to this temple, he guys couldn't understand what we were saying. And then afterwards I said, oh, I know. It's the temple of the glass lotus. I never intended to have the rooftop. as a lotus. I only designed the rooftop, the gluing structure at the top, as a reflection of the light from the inside. So that as the ceremonies go on inside, everybody from the outside can see it. Okay, so it's a temple of the glass lotus. So part one. Aesthetics is not just about beauty. This is a big mistake that architects in architectural schools teach their students. It's about rediscovering the fine human senses in the totality of human politics, economy, and living culture. And I'm very happy to speak here in the University of Economics, because without money, nothing happens. However, we are in the fourth industrial revolution, transitioning very fast into the fifth industrial revolution through the rapid rise of dehumanization. So it's not just about climate change. It's about the human being being made into a machine, right? And machines simply obey instructions that are embedded in the program, okay? And because of the artificial intelligence, or ChatGPT, if you don't know, architectural students, if you use ChatGPT, you can design any building you like. Just put in a few questions and the machine will design for you. Actually, the future, there's no future for architects anymore. So, even people like, well, I wouldn't name names, but the American oligarchy, the super rich, are actually thinking about the ultimate dehumanization of people. That is to remove people altogether, kill them. And the experiment over COVID-19 was an experiment to see whether you can panic the entire population of the whole world and bring it to a stop. And they succeeded. So this is the problem that we are in. We are in a box that has been created by the neoliberal industrial order, which is now the so-called rules-based order. But who set the rules? The United States sets the rules. So rehumanization has to be our shared project. And I want to make this point very strongly. How do we rehumanize? Aesthetics is the key to rehumanization. As we try to catch up materially, we must reinvest and rediscover our deep humanity. The deep recovery of deep humanity is moral and primarily aesthetic. It is the humanity's last recourse and the final refuge from the machine. Okay? So the new role for architects is to design the new humanized future. Making small gestures is not good enough. Putting a few potted plants on a building is not good enough. It's bullshit. And I have a deep revulsion against bullshit, okay? Unfortunately, I have a built-in truth detector, which I can't help. So now I want to talk about aesthetics. Aesthetics is always mistaken with beauty, with art, with style, with fashion, okay? It is about all of that, but it consists of three fundamentals, right? Now, the three fundamentals are at the primary level, at the secondary level, and at the tertiary level. At the primary level are our fundamental instincts built into our DNA. Nature selected it, and we have it because it has deep and important survival value, right? Of how we can be good to each other and how we can be good to nature. That is the primary level of aesthetics. The secondary level is cultural. The cultural aspects of aesthetics are man-made. They are social constructs. But they are social constructs that arise out of tradition on the one hand and out of ideology on the other hand. Okay? So when we see a very good building in our design world, if we do not understand the epistemology of aesthetics, we cannot deconstruct it. We cannot understand why is the design like that. Why is it that design appeals to us or does not appeal to us, right? We do not understand the implicit ideological fixations that we have, okay? For example, precise rectangularity is a very fundamental machine aesthetic that is derived from the manufacturing process, from the second industrial revolution manufacturing process. And it was developed by the Bauhaus in Germany, and then it was adopted by the big corporations, right, as the international style. And therefore, all of architectural education is derived from the international style, which is basically a variation of the Bauhaus. So, the word epistemology needs to be explained. Epistemology is simply the way in which we understand something, okay? We understand some things through, and this is something I learned from my student. The right side of our brain cognizes something, okay? The left side of our brain recognizes the right side of our brain. I pronounce the term recognition to make it clear, because the usual way we use the word is recognition. Okay? We apprehend a sensation, and then through culture and ideology, we comprehend it. Right? That means we manufacture the meaning of it. So, my PhD thesis student did a study on aesthetics. She was frightened of the topic because to tackle the problem at the epistemological level, she could not find any references in the literature. All the references from Plato, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, all of them from history, confuse aesthetics with ethics. With consensus and so on. All of these are social constructs. They are not primary, right? So what we have are three kinds of cultures. At the fundamental level, maybe at the primitive level, we have the primary instincts as predominant. Then the secondary, the cultural, less powerful, maybe more powerful. And then the ideological, so you have these three blocks of different sides, okay? Then in culture B, right, which is the postmodern culture, right? Everything that happened after Foucault and Derrida and all of those guys in France. Then the primary instincts are so totally suppressed. And ideology and culture become predominant. Right? And there was a very interesting dialogue between Noam Chomsky and Foucault. Okay, and just to cut the story short, it boiled down to this: Chomsky made the point that, for example, language arises from deep causation in the human. What shall I say? In the human psyche. Whereas whereas Foucault says the human being is empty. He is simply a subject of power relations. So this is the problem, right? And I think to some extent both are right, because the human being is being buffeted between power relations and primary cognitions. So we are in this complex, right? So the ideal culture is culture A, in which all the three, the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary, the primal, the cultural, and the ideological are in total equilibrium. Okay? Let me give you one example of one building that does this. Culture B. The Pompidou building in Paris, the Pompidou Museum, right? We all like it. It's a very well-designed building. It's very appealing. But the implicit ideology that drives that design is mechanism. You see? Whereas the functionality of it, the circulation system and the flexibility of the display spaces and so on, answers to both cultural as well as primal requirements. So once we understand the relationship within these three, we can do a proper critique of any building without making any judgment. Okay? Because what is happening in our architectural schools is the most important institution that we have, the most important pedagogical instrument that we have is the design crib, right? So in the design crib, when a student puts up a piece of work that is not to the liking of the tutors will typically say, interesting, right? And suggest, look at this project by so-and-so and that project by so-and-so. In other words, what is actually happening is unintended, what's the word? The better word I use is enculturation. In other words, we are indoctrinating the students to a particular aesthetic, to a particular ideology, to a particular culture, and so on. So this is what's happening in architectural schools, right? And my PhD student did the thorough research on this. She interviewed all the students, she interviewed all the tutors, she interviewed all the external professors and so on. And most of them say aesthetics cannot be taught, and aesthetics actually should not be taught. But that's a big mistake. Because unless you understand the epistemology of aesthetics, you cannot discuss any design. Because you cannot break it down, you cannot deconstruct it, right? And then reconstruct your appreciation of that particular design. So this is a big missing part in all architectural schools, not just mine. So why is aesthetics important? Because aesthetics is the last resort for intangible human values found in our fine sensibilities of order, consistency, and vibrancy, and our unconditional love for others, nature, the sense of wholeness that constitutes abiding joy. This is the new civilizational agenda that we should work towards. So it's not just about, how do we organize urbanization, how do we organize the traffic system, how do we organize the street picture, in terms of urban design and so on. It's more about how do we organize a human settlement in the landscape in a way that increases the joy of living, right? And how do we achieve the joy of living without also having some kind of social justice in the distribution of the resources and wealth of the community. So the two are related. So basically my talk is about the dialogical relationship between power and aesthetics. You cannot talk about aesthetics without talking about power. So this is not our future. And Singapore is also not our future. Because Singapore is trying very hard to be like this. Because we are, in every important sense of the word, an appendage of America. So mega urbanization regarded as symbols of progress, right? It's a toxic Western materialist corruption based on free market capitalism. And here I must recommend a very important book by Karl Polanyi, written in 1945 after the Second World War, called The Great Transformation, in which he said, he recommended and argued for a very important balance between marketization, that's capitalism, and social protection, that's socialism. But 40 years later, Nancy Fraser added a third component, emancipation. Right? So we need three components: marketization, to get the economy going, to move the capital, the money; social protection, to protect the people from the exploitation of the marketeer; and thirdly, emancipation, in order to free up the human being's innate senses, aesthetics. Thus, marketization without social protection, or with minimum social protection, becomes militarism. You all know it very well. The whole of Vietnam was devastated. And I organized the anti-US bombing of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, right? And the secret police closed down my firm. So I had to stop being an architect for a few years. So we need a different Asian political economy and a new aesthetic order. So this is the two, right? The left hand. And to quote Einstein, the world will not evolve past its current state of crisis by using the same thinking that created the situation. So architectural schools have to change completely. We cannot follow the old school. We have to have the courage of an Einstein. We are not Einstein. We have to have this kind of courage to think our way forward. It's very different. And it's very strange that our future, because of AI, is going to robotize production, right? That handcrafted architecture may well be the most important rehumanizing thing. So stop building geometrically precise buildings. That's bullshit. That's going to be done by machines. They don't need you. You have to design buildings that have to be built by hand, okay? So this is the project which I did in Ba Vi, in 40 kilometers west of Hanoi, right? At the request of a very good friend of mine. Unfortunately, he passed away, Mr. Tai Quan Trung, right? And in the design process, thinking process, we had a lot of conversations with the anthropologists and the craftsmen in that area. There are 17 villages in that area, and each village had a specific craft tradition. And some of the old craftsmen are still alive, and they have apprentices, okay? So when I presented this scheme to this person, the former Minister of Culture and Tourism, he cried. Tears came out from his eyes. We were sitting around the table, he was sitting on the other side, and he was very emotional. And he said to me, he said to everybody there, that the project would help to preserve the old craftsmen of Vietnam and their apprentice from becoming mindless factory workers. So yes, we need factory workers, but we also need craftsmen. So this is the balance that we need to have. So I was appointed to do the master plan, tourism master plan for Hue 20 years ago. It took 10 years. And there were dozens of People's Committee meetings, which our PhD friend talked about yesterday at his presentation, that there were numerous discussions between us and my design team and the People's Committees to discuss how to preserve the environment, how to preserve the craftsmen, and how do we do a new kind of cultural city, right, and so on. Unfortunately, the project never took off because of the Da Nang airport. Because all international air travel ends up in Da Nang and not in Hue. Because the market size for Hue is not big enough, right? But with Hoi An and Da Nang and a few other places around, the airlines do not fly to Pubai Airport in Hue. So the project is now in kind of hanging in the air. Now, I just want to show you that architects must develop the ability to have important conversations with very interesting multidisciplinary people. Okay, this is a photograph of a meeting in 2010 in Bangkok of Asia's top leaders. It's a group called the Asian Dialogue Society. They invited me to join this group because they were interested in my ideas about rural urbanization, a term which I had to coin called Rubanisation. There's no such word in the dictionary. But very interestingly, because of the economic crisis in Europe, the Spanish coined this word, Rubanismo, to describe the flow of young people and capable people back to the village, because there was no work in the big towns. And interestingly, let me introduce you to some of these people. I have no pointer. But there's on the extreme left, there's a guy sitting there. He is now the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim. Next to him is the editor of The Nation, which is the biggest newspaper in Bangkok. Then there's a guy looking up, right? That is a Surin Pitsuwan, who used to be the Secretary General of ASEAN before he died. Then there is another guy there, which represents the Japan Foundation. And there's Tay Kheng Soon, my good friend. He's an anthropologist and an archaeologist, right? But he's a multi-dimensional person. His father was a curator of the Royal Family Collection in Kuwait. Yeah. And this guy, this guy, is the former Minister of Culture, Minister of Education from Philippines. Okay. And this guy, other guy with the hand on his ear, is a very important intellectual in Malaysia, right? So these are the group of people that I'm in touch with and in conversation with, right? And this meeting was a very small meeting, but it represents 100 intellectuals stretching from Turkey right up to Japan, including China and Indonesia. So this is the kind of conversation that's happening, right? And I must say also to the credit of Anwar, 1995, Vietnam joined ASEAN. Before Vietnam joined ASEAN, the global power relations that's going on, and it took us, there were a whole series of meetings, and then the final meeting was held in Pulau Tioman, on an island, a resort island on the east coast of Malaysia, and the 10 intellectuals came, and they were discussing and came to a deadlock. Anwar at that time, 1998, no, 1993, 1993-94, was Deputy Prime Minister under Mahathir, the then Prime Minister of Malaysia. And he took charge of the situation, and took the head of the Vietnamese intellectuals on a walk along the beach. And when they came back, agreed. That's how how Vietnam joined ASEAN. And that is the kind of discussion that is so important, because when you talk about the topic, right? Southeast Asian urbanism or whatever it's called. You cannot have that without a consensus of views at the intellectual, at the policy level, at the professional level. Right? There has to be this dialogue, and I'm so happy that you are having this dialogue here. But please have more than architects. We need to have more people. Okay. So adding more buildings in cities is only reinforcing the whole dehumanizing order. Right? But I know, man, you all have to make a living, right? So you have to get your feet, get on with life. But let me just caution you, right? This is a very short detour. John Calhoun's Mount's Utopia, right? He built this wonderful utopia. It's a square. He put in 4 pairs of rats, male and female. So there are 4 pairs. Surrounded are well-designed housing units for the rats, plenty of water, plenty of food. And they were very happy, and they were multiplying, right, tremendously, right? And this is what happened, right? So the population grew tremendously, right? And then it started to fall. And in the end, they killed each other. And that was the end of utopia, okay? There's a lesson there. So we need to escape also at times, right? So I thought about it, so I designed this, what I call the forest cathedral, right? Where you climb up this pole, sit on the deck there and meditate in the company of a lot of people, all separate. Okay, the forest cathedral. So humans are not rats. Improving the material living conditions of people is necessary, but it has led to deterioration of the natural environment, climate change, environmental degradation, inequality, geopolitical contestation, the dominance of the military-industrial complex, of covert subversion, media propaganda, social class and ethnic struggle, and so on and so on. So we know all of this. AI threatens jobs. Okay. For the AI kind of economy, you only need 10% of the educated population. 90% will have no job. So what are you going to do? So an important Taiwanese venture capitalist made a suggestion. We need to have 10 times the number of teachers. In other words, every classroom should have only less than 20 students. Right? So you have to have a lot more teachers. And teaching is going to be a very important occupation. Then we need 10 times the number of healthcare providers. Right? And a lot more craftsmen, a lot more social organizers, and so on and so on. So the human aspects of jobs have to be increased. Now I go to part 2. How do I derive the part 1? Right? Part 2 is this. This is an amazing archaeological find in a site called Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, in the southern part of Turkey. Okay, it's very interesting because that's the place where the migration out of Africa, maybe 150,000 years ago, incubated human civilization in this area. Now, very interestingly, you can see that this is a reconstruction of the settlement. It's about 100 families. They are all living in small houses, right? There are no streets. Everybody gets to the house from the rooftop. Okay. And the most interesting thing that I found is that there's no hierarchy, there's no priesthood, there's no chieftain. It's an egalitarian society, right? And when they excavated the burials, because they buried the dead under the floor of the house, so they look at the bones. The bones of the men and the women are just as robust. That means there was no gender differentiation in terms of work. What were they working? They were basically at the transition from the hunter-gatherer society and doing some primitive agriculture, right? So they were basically sharing everything, right? The children, interestingly, the bones of the children were, the DNA was related to the people living in the house, but the children were living in different houses. So in other words, it's one gigantic family, right? And there was no trauma in the bones. That means there was no violence, right? So it changes our whole picture. So this is the beginning of human nature. Only when agriculture began that you have conflict, because the areas that are suffering from drought or from crop failure will attack the areas that are prosperous to rob them, right? So you've seen the movie The Seven Samurais. You will see that the gangsters, right, will attack after the harvest season so they can steal the results, right? So the other aspects of human nature, the later development of human nature is when we begin to have agriculture and then to have the feudal system, the gathering of wealth and so on. And then today we have the money system. So this is where the human being, the innate collaborative spirit is now replaced by greed and envy and aggression. So this is 12,000 years ago, at the end of the Younger Dryas, which is the end of the Ice Age. And also we need to learn from the near-death experiences, very interesting, right? And there are many studies of thousands of people who died and then came back, right? And all of them have one more or less similar experience. They have a total life review, they go through a tunnel, and they see a huge light behind, and go to the lighted area, and they see a beautiful landscape of flowers and so on, right? And depending on your religious background, right, some people will meet the angels and the gods, and some people will meet their relatives, their ancestors and so on. So, in other words, deep down in the human psyche is a sense of unconditional love. This is what everybody feels, no matter what religion you come, right? In other words, how do we design a new human civilization in which unconditional love is the order of human life? And aesthetics is very much part of that, right? Without aesthetics, you have no deep sense of the beauty of other people, the beauty of environment, the beauty of yourself, right? The beauty of ideas and thoughts. Okay, so this is very important. And this is E.O. Wilson, the great biologist, that nature holds the key to our aesthetic, intellectual, cognitive, and even spiritual satisfactions. So this is a very crucial thing, right? So when I'm talking about rural urbanization, what I'm really hoping for is a kind of lifestyle that is materially sufficient, socially and culturally satisfying, and joyful in the environment of the settlement, right? Where there must be good schools, good health, and so on. Okay, So here is exploration of the brain, how our brain works. And it's very important because the way that our brain works, the brain is actually the model for our human settlement design. Okay? So this is very important. V.S. Ramachandran, who is the professor of neuroscience in the University of San Diego, right? He's got a lot of lectures on YouTube, so please go and listen to him. He's a great exponent of how our brain works. This is a very important, another neuroscientist in the University of Sydney, right? Alan Snyder, who I met and had discussions with, and it's very interesting. And this has direct implications to our architectural education. Okay. He developed a device called the transcranial magnetic device. It's a small thing like this. It's put on the left side of your brain. The left side of your brain is the language and logical part of the brain, right? The right side of the brain is the sensory brain, right? The cognitive brain. The left side is the recognizing brain, right? Now this transcranial device temporarily does not do any damage. It temporarily suppresses the action of the left side of the brain. This experiment was with students. I don't know about your students, but most students in advanced urban environments cannot draw. They can draw diagrams. So they were asked to draw a horse or draw a face. They typically draw an oval for the head, a stick for the neck, a rectangle for the body, right? And 4 stick legs, right? And a tail, and that's it. But after the effect of the transcranial device, they could draw a beautiful horse. So what's happening? What is happening is very clear, that our cognition, our sensory capability is being suppressed by our thinking. So our thinking brain is screwing us up. Stop thinking. At least stop thinking in the usual way, right? Okay. So these are some of the experiments, and you can get it on YouTube, all right? Now, I just wanted to draw your attention to some innate senses that we have. Why do we find kittens, puppies, and teddy bears endearing? And therefore children, right? What about the proportions of these things that endear us to them? And my conclusion is that all of them have big head, chubby body, and short legs. That's it. If you design a building with a big top, a fat center part, and short legs, everybody will love your building. So this is the aesthetics at the primary level, okay? All right. Now the other thing is rhythm. Why is it that in every culture, whether it's a village culture or in a New York City or any other place, children, when they are happy, they skip. They skip when you're walking. Why? Because it's like flying, right? It's like flying. It's flying without wings. So when you're happy, you fly. Okay? So I urge you all, fly. Now, the other pedagogical problem that we have is maturation. Okay? This is I call it the maturation cycle, right? When you're born, your consciousness is in the center of your being. Okay? Within 21 days, your consciousness shifts to the edge of your being. Interestingly, the Greek word for the beginning is described as undifferentiated consciousness. So what you feel when you are born is you feel the light and you feel the warmth of your mother or the crib or whatever. Okay? And then the word the Greeks use is noia, N-O-I-A, noia. Right? It's a state of undifferentiated consciousness. The moment, the first consciousness is when you recognize that you are not the other person. You are not your mother. That mother is a different thing. Okay? That is the beginning of paranoia. Right? That is the beginning of your existential anxiety. Some spiritual sects from Persia. And he was a very liberal person, and he was a very good artist in himself. So he started the basic design course. And to encourage the students, he's very liberal, right? So they had also the whole Bauhaus moved to Weimar. Weimar is the cultural capital of Germany at that time, right? So you have Goethe and you have Schiller and all the great intellectuals of Germany were all based in Weimar. And so Weimar is a very liberal place, but they couldn't take it. They told the Bauhaus get out because the students and their tutors were having free sex. They were having wild parties, right? And all kinds of shenanigans, right? And even the liberal culture of Weimar leaders couldn't take it. So they had to move, and they moved to Dessau, the industrial center of Germany at that time. Now there's a lesson here. So the point I want to make is that in the pedagogy of design education, you must liberalize the adventure spirit of this young student. Because adventuresomeness is a very important part of skipping. Okay? However, in the European culture, adventuresomeness is expressed through liberal sexuality. In Asia, we do not accept that, right? So what do we do in Asia? We must have. Can architectural schools become adventure centers? That's my question, right? Can an architectural school be in a treehouse? Can it be floating on a river? Can it be in a forest? Can it be in the market? In other words, can it be in all kinds of wild places? Why do we have architectural schools in solid concrete buildings? Wrong. We must have an experiential environment in which students are at risk, but no administrator wants to have students at risk. So this is problematic, right? Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So as we mature, we throw away our false model, and hopefully when we turn the corner, as we mature, we throw away more and more of our fake self, of our constructed self, and ultimately, hopefully, by the time we reach older age, like myself, you're throwing it all away, right? And you become a child again. Wonderful. That's how it should be. All right. Now, so in my studio in the NUS, I got my students to build tree house. And I don't know about your students here, but my students have never held a hammer in their life. They've never held a saw in their life. So it was like a great adventure to learn how to put a nail into a piece of wood without banging your thumb, you know? Okay? And many of them have blue-black thumbs, but they enjoyed it, right? And we spent 2 weeks in the forest and built these tree houses, and it was a wonderful thing. And we had a barbecue on top of the tree. Can you imagine that? That's adventure, right? Okay. So that's how I think we need to involve students in adventurous activity, right? So these are the kind of things that go on. Now here's the most problematic part. How do we think? What's the relationship within power relations, production and consumption relations, and so on? Okay, let me just take you through this. By the way, this was a paper I presented in 1984 in Manila at the Acacia conference, and nobody understood. And I think it's still hard to understand. And some people thought it was some kind of a mystical charm. Okay, so the real world, the complexity of the real world is consisting of three vertical columns. Right? The substructure, the structure, and the superstructure. So these are categories which are Marxian in nature, right? And then horizontally, you have three categories which are Buddhistic or Freudian or psychoanalytical categories, right? The barely conscious, the conscious, and the superconscious. Notice the three verticals are intersected by three horizontals. Therefore, you have 9 squares, right? So the center square is our everyday life. It is the relationships at the structural level of consciousness, conscious structure, the square, right? That is the relation between the production and consumption relations. So man, that's labor, materials, that's things, right? Methods, that's technology, and meanings, that's value system, right? Or money, okay? So this circle is what produces the superstructure, which is design, which is art, which is philosophy or whatever, right? Ideas. However, this structural level, the production relations, production and consumption relations, which produces the expressions, right, is also conditioned by at the structural level of the pre-structure, right? That is all the fixations, ideologies, cultures, and manufactured ideas, and psychological inhibitions, and so on. So, in other words, none of these categories, none of the 9 categories are independent of each other. All the categories are in relation to each other. So so if you think of these 9 squares having a vertical dimension that indicates its degree of impact, right? The higher it is, the greater the impact. Then there are the minimum number of 362,880 permutations. Minimum number. In other words, reality consists of a minimum number of 362,880 possibilities. In other words, you cannot be ideologically fixated. It's ridiculous. It's mentally, it's a sign of mental deficiency. All right? So, how do you navigate this thing? This is fundamental, see? So, if we can find a way to teach how to navigate this thing, first is to recognize that all cultural and ideological constructs are simply social constructs. So let's not be romantic or anything, okay? But we must understand the relationships and how each part has an impact on the other part, okay? So actually the total number of permutations is 362,880 to the same power. So there are trillions of variations. In other words, this is the total capacity of the human mind. Okay? With these 100 billion neurons, right? And the number of permutations that it is capable of is incredible. We are incredible machines. So part 3, the consequence, right? So understanding complexity, understanding the human condition, understanding the depth of human capability, what do we do about the materiality of life, right? So the following are examples of my ideas of the new rehumanized economic spatial order. So eco-regionalism. I just use the example Singapore, Johor, Malaysia, Sumatra, and part of Java as a model. And in this area, it's 45 million people, right? And there is a this is Malacca, and this is Rupa Island, and there's going to be a bridge here being proposed by China. China wants to build this bridge here in order to gain access to the material resources of Sumatra. Okay? And China is putting up a huge port in Malacca, right? Which will also serve as a military base against possible US blockage of the Straits of Malacca. So this is part of geopolitical movement, it's part of economic movement. How can we use this as a total system? So the southern one, this project was a project which was started in 1995 between the Institute of Architects in Malaysia, the Singapore Institute of Architects, because I was president, and the Indonesian Institute of Architects. And we proposed building a bridge, a floating bridge, across from Singapore to Batam. Right? And then from Batam, ultimately across to Sumatra. So in other words, we can create this loop. Right? Now, can we imagine this is a model for Indochina, right? For Eastern Indonesia, including Philippines, right? And then including the whole of Asia, India, China, Japan, Korea, South East Asia. This is the future. This is the future that the American oligarchs want to prevent because they want to be the one to control this area. So this is the struggle that is going to take place over the next, I don't know how many years. This is why it's not about it's about the global danger, all right? So those pink dots are new settlements, right? And some of the studies that are being made about, riverine settlements, water settlements, different kinds of modifications to existing settlements and so on and so on. All of these things are to me downstream. The upstream is the strategic eco-regional plan, right? So we need to have aircraft, vertical takeoff, right? This is the wing swings this way, right? Then it takes off, and then once it's high enough, you swivel forward and fly forward, right? So this is developed in 1965. So this particular one is developed in Canada, right? And I built a ground effect vehicle. I spent 10 years building it, right? So I learned something about aeronautics, right? So this is my proposal, right? And Singapore would be the assembling center. The body could be made in Indonesia. The wing could be made in Vietnam. Whatever the wheels and so on could be made in Philippines. This could be an ASEAN project, okay? And then we will have the ability to connect to all the small towns and villages. So every village will be accessible. This is I call it a sky bus, right? 100 passengers, right? And I must tell you this story of my China student, my PhD China student, who was inspired by my ideas about rural urbanization, and he went to a small village in southwest China. He took a laptop and gave it to the local provision shop, 50-year-old guy. He immediately learned it and was able to start a whole business. That village sells pomelo at 1 renminbi a piece. With the with the internet connection, he was able to sell it at 10 renminbi to the next town 100 kilometers away. And in China, the road system is very good. So therefore, they can transport, right? So the village was a great success. And Jack Ma heard about it, and Jack Ma came to visit my student. I have a photograph my student sent to me of Jack Ma and him, right? And Jack Ma said to him, he's going to start 500 villages like that within a month, right? And today, Alibaba is the biggest retailer in the world, okay? So, and I also learned a very interesting lesson from my wife, who is a manic buyer of things on the internet, right? So she bought preserved apricots in a bottle from a small village in the mountains of Taiwan. How is it possible that a small village can have a product that can sell in a big city? In fact, can sell in the whole world. This is the future of the small settlement, right? So urbanization is definitely a possible way of living, right? The big mega city is obsolete. We should stop building in the big city. How to do so is a macro financing problem. So what are the alternatives? I developed this model with my students called a modular city, 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. Right? And the question we ask is, how can we house, what is the total number of people that we can house in this settlement, which is surrounded by farms and water supply and energy. Energy will be from thorium nuclear plant, packaged. The size of your wallet is enough to power the entire town. The center of the town, the green part, is where the factories are, and the shops and the offices, right? And surrounding it are the housing, and the red part is what I call the central nervous system. That's how we should plan a settlement. In the central nervous system, you have all the schools, the primary schools, the secondary schools, the universities, the shops, the cultural centers, the cinemas, the performing arts, and so on. In other words, the central nervous system is the chi of your life. It's the chi meridian. It's the energetic system of your community. Everything is within walking distance. All the cars and vehicles are below the deck. Okay? So it is possible. And then I asked my students to look at the traditional village towns that you like. So they chose Florence, they chose Macau, they chose Barcelona, and so on. So we adapted the plan onto the site. And it's something I realized. Our students cannot do geometrically irregular designs. At least our Singapore students. Everything must be square, rectangular. Everything must be symmetrical. Okay? So to have organic order or disorder, they can't do. So I told them, go and copy and adapt. So we worked it out that the population we can house here is 100,000. Okay? So with 100,000, we then propose, if we can have a blank slate, how do we redesign the whole of Singapore? Okay, so this is one of the proposals, right? So we have clusters of modular cities, each one surrounded by vegetable farms, so we are self-sufficient in vegetable. Each one is self-sufficient in terms of water and energy, right? And we found that we could triple the amount of natural areas, right? So we joke that we can bring the tigers back, see, and the elephants. Yeah. So I think it's possible to have a high degree of urbanization, high degree of functionality, right, of sociability, yeah, and have good relation with nature. Okay. So this is the other model, the Leuven model, the circular model, right, which by the way was proposed in a way, and the People's Committee and all the regional committees, they came to that meeting which they had with me about, and they all agreed we must have urban settlements in the whole of Wei. But it never happened because they don't know how to raise the finance. So this is a picture of me published in some magazine. Now the other big idea is how do we turn an urban settlement into a brain? Okay, what is a brain? A brain is a complex neural network. Okay, and the neural network, in this case, the neural network is the MRT system, the train system, right? Unfortunately, the way it's implemented in Singapore is that it is not seen as a neural network. Because if it is a neural network, then at every station point is actually a great synaptic point, right? That's where all the information should be there. In other words, the idea is to turn the whole of Singapore into a campus city, right? So this campus city will be the center for technology, for knowledge acquisition, knowledge transmission, research, as well as finance mobilization. But Singapore cannot think like that, does not think like that. The Singapore government is still tied to the idea of being an effective part of the global supply chain, right? Ultimately ending in the West. And then in 1991, I proposed together with my Institute of Architects a tropical city, right? The big issue is not how do you put potted plants on buildings, but how do you reduce the urban temperature, the heat island effect, which is typically about, I don't know about here, but in Singapore it's about 5 degrees Celsius higher than the temperature outside, merely because of the heat that's trapped in all the building structures, right? So the exothermic and the endothermic temperatures are trapped.